All right, welcome everyone. I'm here with my man Jared Mazezka. Man, how you feeling today, brother?
I'm doing well, Anthony. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh man, I'm just happy to have you here, man. I'm glad you took the time out of your day, man. I'm grateful when anybody takes time out just to hop on and have a conversation with me. Um, you know, Obviously, man, I've been interviewing and talking to a lot of fathers, and you, as you know, you're a father of two, all right, three actually,
No,
all
just
right,
just
two,
two, just two
just
so far.
two.
I know there's going to be another one potentially planned in the future, but well, that'll come in
Oh,
time.
okay. So your new one is having about around 7, 8 months. How's that going?
It's going really well, man. He is the coolest little boy you'll ever meet. Super cute. It's crazy. I don't know where he got it from.
How's he sleeping?
He is actually the most chill baby I think I have ever known. Like it's been probably since he was 2 3 months old. Like he had spurts where he would sleep through the night, a couple nights a week or something. But since 2 3 months, he's an all night sleeper. Maybe wake up once, but
Okay,
it's got deal.
okay, yeah, that's cool, man. But I don't know if you remember what your daughter was like when she was that age. Was How did she sleep? Were they about the same or different?
So it's retrospectively I can see a difference. At the time, like everything was great. I didn't see anything abnormal, but my daughter actually at about a year and a half old was diagnosed with a brain tumor and cysts that were about the size of mandarin orange.
Mm,
So looking back on it, all the nights that we spent walking around with her and rocking and trying to like hanging over the rails of the crib with our heads on her back or on her chest, trying to get her to go to sleep. Like it wasn't anything that was intimidating then. But in retrospect, now it makes sense.
yeah, yeah, that's cool, man. And while we're on that topic, man, just you talking about your daughter and like, we're on this. We're about to have this conversation about fathers and fathers' rights, and tell us a little bit about your story and how you got you know, into this fight for fathers' rights.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes way back. I don't know if her mom and I were ever the best fit, right? We tried to make it work and everything, but when we split, that's kind of when things went south, and immediately, I was kind of forced out of the apartment, and her dad bought out my share of it. I had to live with a friend, for a couple months until an apartment in a college town became available because, they always rent, May to May or September to
Right.
September. And those month to month apartments are always hard to come by and also super expensive. Um, but, at that time, I was working full time, and my ex was a stay at home mom. My daughter had some medical issues that required kind of around the clock monitoring, regular birth to three checkups inside our house, regular pediatrician visits, and then regular follow ups to UPMC Children's in Pittsburgh. So, rather than be that a-hole, right, and say, I want 50-50, I did what made sense. And I worked 45 minutes away in an office 4 to 5 days a week. She stayed at home. So, I conceded to 72-28%.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what made sense at the time.
Right.
And I did that for a while, and it worked out okay. But it got to the point where I no longer worked in that office. I worked from home the majority of the time. I was more available and more able to care for her. And she went from being very medically fragile to now she's in school full time, and
Mm,
she's left after school care at Keepers at her private school. And now her mom also works 4 to 5 days a week, 45 minutes away.
yeah.
So, from that perspective, all three parties involved in this, our lives did a complete 180, right?
Right.
To any reasonable person, I think that would be, considered what the law says is a substantial change in circumstance.
Yeah.
It's so vague, and there's nothing concrete in place to say what constitutes that substantial change. When I modified for a modification of the parent, where I motioned for a modification of the parenting plan, I went to court and we fought it out, and we had a hearing that lasted 8 hours one day. There were months and months and months of back and forth discovery and answers, and Even after that, I in that court hearing, what really got me, even more than the judge saying, I don't think there's been a substantial change. We even raised, why is it not in the child's best interest to spend more time with her dad?
Yeah.
And the judge basically said, we're not here for the best interest of the child. We're here to prove a change, and I don't think that's happened. And that's what really got me.
So that's wild, man. And I imagine that varies based upon what judge you get, right? And that's one of the I think a big issue a lot of guys are having is that there's not a lot of set rules. It's kind of based on it's very subjective, the court system. And when you said you got 72, like 28%, right? Like, was that through the court, or was that something that you two agreed upon?
So that was something that we had agreed upon because, that's what I was available for at that time. And given my daughter's, circumstances, she needed that additional care. And rather than me demand 50-50 and then go out and get a babysitter, it only makes sense to allow her mom to be that person who's there in the home with her. So
for somebody listening to this that may not be familiar, you don't have to have, right? Like you verbally agreed upon that. And if you can't come to a different agreement verbally, then you gotta take legal action, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, even then, any temporary parenting plan or final parenting plan, they have to go through the court. It's whether we agree on it or not, we have to go in front of a judge, and the judge says, is this the agreement? Okay, I'll sign off on it. Mm-hmm. So no matter what, people have to go to court for it.
Okay, just for like something in writing.
Yes.
Because like, for example, me and my kid's mom, we have a verbal agreement. We get along pretty well. We communicate pretty well. We're both pretty reasonable people. And so we've never been to court. All right. So we just decided that, okay, we try to do what makes sense. Yeah. Like right now, just like you said from the very beginning, you did what makes sense based on your situation, your circumstances, where you were working. So right now, the kids, they get on the school bus at their mom's house. So they stay most of the week at their mom's house. And then they stay every weekend with me, and I drop them off Monday morning at school or off to the bus, right? But during the summer, we switched. Like last summer, we did 1 week on, 1 week off. And we just had a conversation, and we agreed that's how we were going to do it. Right. So, but if you can't come to some kind of agreement necessarily, like obviously you got to go through the court.
Yeah. And I mean, a big part of that too is, I was the sole breadwinner of the family. So, and I guess it goes back to, we didn't have that distinct ability to say, hey, here's what's best. Let's do this, because, from the get-go, I was forced out, and she said, you're not going to see our kid. And if you do, you can come to our house and see her for 2 hours once. So, that wasn't good enough for me. So I was the one who actually filed to have a parenting plan established, because I wanted more than that 2 hours supervised visitation, right? But also, part of the, even if we would have come to that agreement and done that, I was the only person who was working at the time. So there would have had to have been, if we couldn't come to an amount, right, there would have had to have been a child support order as well. So, yeah.
So like in your own personal journey, maybe you can speak to, obviously you can speak to your own personal journey, but some of the stuff you've seen, what's been like are some of the biggest hurdles, like just to get shared parenting, get some equal rights for the fathers? What's been some of the biggest hurdles for you?
So I guess it kind of depends on what route we want to go with it.
Okay.
I can say, over the last few years, there have been several bills that have presented to the West Virginia legislature that advocate for shared parenting. Last year was really, really good, and it got shot down in Judiciary Committee. It's funny. My fiance and I actually drove down the night before, sat in committee all day long on the last day of session, and finally at like 11 p.m. we were there until 2 a.m. testifying to the committee members, before they could go home. for the end of the session. Session like 60 days in West Virginia. But, everything came back to, from what we could gather, the judges and their desire to have, this unending discretion and ability to decide for themselves without anything concrete in place.
Yeah.
They were some of the biggest opponents to this bill, and there was actually a judge there who was advocating against the bill, which is completely outside of her purview as a judicial officer of the court. They're intended to interpret the laws that are made, not to sway what laws are made.
Right.
So it's a whole can of worms, man. But some of the biggest hurdles are people, unless they've been through it, unless they've seen family court, whether it be themselves or a loved one or someone they know, they don't know what's involved. And everyone's opinion is, because it just makes sense, right? I thought 50-50 was the standard. Where there's literally nothing in West Virginia statute that says anything currently about even the desire to make 50-50 the starting point. It's all, like you said, based on the quoted terms, the best interest of the child and a substantial change in circumstance, as far as parenting plans and modifications thereof.
Yeah.
So the biggest hurdles that we have when we lobby with legislators is showing them, like, here's what the law says, and here are the statistics that show that like 90+% of cases that go to court end up with the children with the mother primarily. And it just doesn't make sense, as far as all the social scientific studies that prove that children are better off when they have two fit parents who love them and want to contribute to their lives.
And do you think that's just because of where we started, like socially, like as a society, like men were the breadwinners and the women stayed at home with the kids, and so just society told us that the kids are better off with their mother, and we're fighting against societal norms? Is that one of the things that you would say is a big issue?
It is a big issue, and that's kind of how West Virginia law is currently established. We were briefly talking before this. What they kind of based it on was the idea that kids can only form one strong bond with a parent. So they're already at a disadvantage because, whether mom or dad's there, they have to choose one that they're more connected to. But especially as job duties and responsibilities and education is changing, like there are more women achieving higher level degrees now than there are men, and women are entering the workforce at a higher rate and are more driven to succeed. It's a lot different than in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, where men were the primary breadwinners. Whether it's the active advancement of women in the workforce, or it's just the natural progression of movement. It's things are shifting, things are evolving, and our laws need to do that as well.
Right. And then for some reason there's a lag in the catch up between actual how society is moving and how the law is changing.
Yeah, and I mean, you've been in West Virginia, I think, for a little while. I mean, you can probably relate. We are behind the rest of the country in everything. There's typically not one thing that we are the leader pushing something, with the exception of natural resources. And it's unfortunate that our laws kind of follow that same pattern.
So what's been one of the biggest changes since you've been in this fight? Like, what do you think has been one of the biggest changes in as far as like men in favor of men getting equal parenting rights?
So it's a fluid topic. It's something that I'm sure a lot of your listeners and a lot of your followers, they see their situations and they're like, man, I've got it so bad, and there's no way that anybody else is in this situation. But I'll tell you what, man, just from starting you're being involved in the start of a little movement right here in West Virginia. we are not the only ones.
Yeah.
There are tons and tons of people who are battling the same things that we are. And there's no way to know that until you start communicating these things. And it's like, oh man, I didn't know that you were in this situation too, or that he was.
Yeah.
You know, got it worse than I do. You know, listening to some of the horror stories of family court. But you know, just the ability to interact and support each other and bounce ideas off of each other. And you know, there are always benefits to working together in numbers. You know, 2 is better than 1, say, right? Yeah. But 400 is better than 4.
Yeah.
The more people that you can kind of gather for movements like this, the better, because the larger groups that are out there, you know, they're organized, and we're just. And now let me preface. You know, I was about to say we're a bunch of dads who are awesome dads trying to make things better, right? But it's not a moms versus dads thing, because there are a lot of moms that are in the same situation. So, you know, what we aim to do is make it better for all parents,
yeah,
all children, because they're going to be better off the more time they get to spend with each of their good parents.
Yeah.
You know, we had a lot of good stuff in the bill last year, and the judiciary chairman, he sat on it for like 29 days or something, longer than any other bill that passed the judiciary in the Senate last year. And when it got to him, they finally brought it up for discussion. He struck the entire thing and inserted some stuff. He essentially inserted a bill that he wanted to run that they shot down. But when it did finally pass, the biggest thing that came of that bill, and brace yourself because it's mind-boggling that I'm going to say this, but the biggest change that came from the legislation that passed last year was that judges now have to provide a reason that they decided the way that they did. Before last year, didn't have to provide a reason, just did what they wanted to.
That's so insane, man.
It really
is
is.
So insane that you don't have to provide a reason why you make a choice with such dramatic effect on people's lives, like kids' lives, mothers, fathers. Like it's such a big choice to make, and that has a lot of weight. You make a decision like that, and to not have to give any reason, it just seems pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
And like you said, as you said it, and I was thinking as you said it, like this is not men or against women, dads against moms. This is like there's a lot of women, and even in this fight, not, you know, they're fighting for their own rights, but there's also women. So a lot of women fighting for dads' rights too, and which is pretty awesome.
And that's something that we've discovered is, you know, as we continue our outreach, and, you know, we've got a Facebook group similar to what you've got, you know, but we're focused on the legislation side right here in West Virginia. You know, West Virginians for Shared Parenting. You know, something that we've discovered in that is when we get people requesting to be in this closed group, because, you know, we do use it as a resource for strategy and what senators and what delegates do we need to contact to help to sway these other ones or get this sponsorship. We get a lot of women who are joining this group, and we've got our questions. Do you know anybody in the group? You know, what's your current parental time, your custodial allocation, and how would a 50-50 presumption change your situation in life? And almost every one of them is, man, my husband is fighting for his kids, you know, my stepkids. And it's not just the kids, it's not just the parents, it's step parents too. You know, these people are bonuses that are coming into kids' lives and want to create those bonds and want to nurture those bonds and create an even better experience for these kids to grow up in.
Yeah. Do you find, like, because I have my group, right, and then my group is just for men only, because it's a co-parenting fathers group, and I wanted it to be a safe space for men to be able to vent, talk, share, whatever. But I get a lot of women requesting to be in a group, right, and women saying like, hey, like you said, my husband is in a wild co-parenting situation, or my brother or my boyfriend or something like that, and they just want to hear what other men are talking about. And sometimes I find it that, I don't know what it's like for you in the group, are guys that are joining this group, are there a lot of men that are willing to like tell their story and like ask for help, or because I've seen that a lot of guys they might join the group, they don't necessarily want to ask for help specifically. Like they want to, they kind of get into, like, I think what we all fall victim, not we all, but at some point, men, and there's that ego involved where it's like they're in the group and they're looking for information, but looking for information so they can kind of like figure it out on their own. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Have you experienced that?
We do get, a decent amount of people like, has anybody had an experience in Raleigh County with this judge or in Monongalia County with this judge? And, there is a lot of support that goes back and forth. And, we try to keep, as far as the admins of the group go, right, we try to keep the topics generally on course with the legislative process and what we need to do to affect change. But we don't cut that off and say, hey, we are only here for this reason, because we're all in this fight together, and we're all in it for the same reason, to make things better for your kids. So if anybody has questions like that or needs something, like, we are resources, and there are other people who are going through or have gone through the same thing. We do get a lot of the step parents that are in there, but it's usually just the, what can I do to make this better?
Yeah.
I've in our process, we reached out to a bunch of different groups to see what kind of support we could solicit, for us. And, there are a bunch of, bonus parents, stepmoms and stepdads, and all these resources that are, similar to yours, are tailored to a specific demographic. What part of this situation are you in? And if we can't answer something, then we'll send them somewhere else to see. There are other people out there who probably know better than we do for that. My fiance that I said we were at the judiciary, until 2 a.m. testifying. She was 7 months pregnant then, and she kind of was part of that growing up too. She didn't have the best relationship with her dad, and she kind of said that, or her mom told her at one point, as we were in this fight, that I took your dad back to court just because I could. And she recognized that as an adult, and wanted to affect that change and make up for it in a way. But having all those resources like those step parents, it's been huge, because they feel a lot of this too. I can see with my own daughter, she's come to our house, when several years ago, she was a lot younger, but she said, I'm not allowed to kiss people in daddy's family, only mommy's. Like, that didn't come from her.
Yeah.
But as she gets older and into this 10-year-old tween stage, like, we've found stuff in her journals that, says that she hates my fiance and why she do this stuff. And, it's probably stuff that's put in her head from somebody else, but it's stuff that we don't want to bring up to her either. We don't want to extend that conflict, and having an outlet to write something like that's good. But, to get back on topic, as far as like the step parents and stuff go, it's great to have, access to groups like this to be able to bounce those ideas off. But, as far as yours goes, and creating that safe space for, dads in particular, that's important too.
Yeah.
Because, if historically speaking, right, men are less likely to ask for help anyway. And especially it weakens them to women, like, none of us want to seem like the weak link to our significant others or our family members who might depend on us.
Yeah.
So, being able to share those experiences with other people in that same situation is, really pivotal.
Yeah. I was just talking to my fiance about this book I was reading. It's a really short book. I listen to audiobooks, and I don't know what order it goes in, but it's like The Boy, the Horse, the Fox and the Mole, or something like that. And it's like it's about an hour long audiobook. And it has a lot of really great nuggets in it. I've listened to it a few times already. And it's just like, throughout the whole story, it's just giving you little nuggets of wisdom through this little friendship of the boy, the fox, the horse, and the mole. Like, for example, like you were talking about men and how, just naturally we don't ask for help. And and like they'll be walking along and the boy will be like, the boy say to the horse, he'll be like, hey, horse, like, what's the bravest thing you've ever said? And like the horse said, help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's like the whole story is like that, where there's just like, it's just like little nuggets of like, as of this friendship and this relationship. And that's true, man. I've experienced it myself, where it's just like, you don't, it's exactly what you said. As a man, we've been conditioned a certain way. And, you want to be able to take care of your family, like physically, financially, emotionally. Like, you want to be the rock, the strong one. You want to make sure everybody's taken care of and they're not suffering. You'll suffer and suffer and suffer just so they don't have to suffer.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, that's just how we roll, man. And and we gotta have these support systems, people to lean on. We gotta be able to trust that we don't have to be, we don't necessarily have to be that way. People want to help us. People want to be there to support us. Like our women, even our kids, they want to be there to support us in how they can. We got to utilize those resources for sure. Yeah, man, it's tough. I was thinking of another question I had. And I was like, as I was saying, I lost my train of thought. I wanted to ask you, but with your group is growing and growing. I was like, how can, like, if I'm not gonna get in this necessarily try to fight this legal fight or like try to help change legislation, what if I'm just a regular guy, regular dad, regular person? How can they contribute to this fight?
It's something that's really picked up over the last year or two. Obviously I'm based here in West Virginia, and we're working on this within our own state. But Georgia, Arkansas, Ohio, Missouri, Texas are all huge examples of different states that are working toward the same goal. Kentucky in 2017, they actually passed, and I think maybe Arkansas last year passed true 50-50 presumption of custody within
Nice.
the legislature. So that is actually code now within those two states. And it's kind of created a movement, and obviously it's being met with backlash from a lot of groups that are in these other states that are trying to push this forward. But something I was on another podcast a while back, and they asked me, what can you do as far as leadership, or what's one leadership nugget of information that you can give to somebody else? And kind of what I said was, just do something, get involved. Like, if it's something little or if it's something big, if it's a benefit for somebody, it's going to help somebody, and it's probably going to help someone else more than it's going to help you.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of groups out there right now that are really big with pushing this presumption of 50-50 custody, for fit parents. The Fathers' Rights Movement, the National Parents Organization, they're both huge. The NPO, I think, is actually a nonprofit. And we had worked with them last year to provide some funding. We did a little bit of crowdfunding within our group, and I think they paid for half of it. But they did an independent third-party poll of 50-50 parenting and what people's mindsets were, and would you be likely to support a candidate who is in support of 50-50 parenting? Would you be likely to support a judge who is up for candidacy who supports 50-50 parenting?
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of groups out there that are really, really working nationwide to create something better. I think Dad Talk Live is maybe a Facebook group. I know they do a podcast, similar stuff. But the NPO and Fathers' Rights Movements are a couple of the really big ones that we've worked with, who have a followers, a lot of numbers, and a lot that can support people who are, on the same quest across the country.
Oh, yeah, that's cool, man. Is there anything, like, when you from the start of this fight to now, that you thought to yourself that you thought may have been true, and as you progressed in this fight and saw different things and learned more, that kind of change your perspective on an issue?
I don't necessarily know that, I changed my perspective on a lot of issues. I've realized that not all people or not all organizations are going to look at this from a reasonable standpoint. One thing that I didn't know when I got into this was how state funding ties back, federal funding to the state level ties back into everything. Something I didn't realize is that every custody case that results in child support is tracked and goes back to the federal government, and the state receives funding for every case that involves, based upon how much child support. So, in West Virginia in particular, because there is no presumption of 50-50, not only does it promote the weaponization of kids within the courtroom to get more time for a parent to receive more money in child support, it actually, creates an incentive for the courts themselves to create those situations that result in higher amounts of child support, because now the state and the counties are getting more funding. And that's under, the Title 4D, where it ties back into there.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like you mentioned, like deciding what's reasonable, right? Like and we've had a couple conversations, and you seem like a pretty reasonable guy, right? Like so I'm interested to hear your perspective on. So there's it happens all the time, every day, where two parents are trying to agree on what's right, and they can't agree. Like, how do you determine? Maybe even in that situation, or even like when it comes to lawmaking, if we're taking all like other special interests aside, how do you decide what's reasonable? Do you come to that end goal, or that end agreement? How do you decide what's reasonable?
So, I try to be a relatively reasonable person, and to think of it from the perspective that, our goal is to put kids first in all of this. So, in my particular situation, right, it didn't make sense for me to take more time than I did when we first went through all this. And, unfortunately, not all people are going to, have that mindset, and it is dead set on, I want this amount of time, or I want more than that. I want more than you. And I follow some of the Facebook groups in Morgantown and surrounding areas, and when I see a post, I saw one yesterday on the Mon and Preston County page. It's like, does anybody have an excellent attorney to help me get my kids? I commented on it and said, I really hope that your priorities include equally shared parenting if there are two good parents and the kids aren't in danger. So from that reasonable perspective, right, it's not about us. It really isn't. No part of this is about what's best for us. It's what's best for the kids. And a lot of times what's best for the kids is best for both parents too. So it's kind of a trickle down effect there. But, that's the best way that I can put it is, just think about your kids when you think about yourself. Don't let your hate for your spouse or your ex, outweigh your love for your kids. And that's what I feel like everything needs to come down to, from our own actions to the legislative actions.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I like to work with people on. It's like, because even when you say, like, right, we're talking about somebody who is like, right, quote unquote, reasonable, that can maybe have a better sense of, or idea, and enough self-awareness to say when I'm really truly thinking about the kids and when I'm thinking about myself. Because even when you say what's best for the kids, right, that can also be very subjective. And so what I like to work with people on is like, what is guiding your decisions? All right. So like, because like you said, like we're saying, what's best for the kids can be subjective. So are you if you're saying this is best for the kids, have you analyzed your own thoughts and your own fears about things, your own, like, just that complete total self-analysis on why you make the decisions you make? And then can you say, is it about you or is it about the kids? Like, are you making because I know I've talked to quite a few parents, and a lot of parents make fear-based decisions, right? And they think it's in the best interest of the child, but it's really because they're making decisions based on their own fears, right? So that's not necessarily in the best interest of the child. That's for you so you feel safe and you feel comfortable. And it's hard sometimes for people to determine that.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. Like this isn't an easy process for anybody, especially kids. But I can say firsthand, it takes a toll on us too. But it's kind of like what we were talking about before, as far as men go. You bite your lip and give it hell. You suck it up and keep going.
Yeah, that's pretty much, man. And until you can, and I feel like that's why conversations like these are important. Like, because we're able to, you got to have good people in your circle. We're able to check each other and be like, hey, man, like that ain't the right way to do it. That may have been, that's like an old way of thinking. Like, we don't have to be that way. We can express our emotions. We can talk about when we're down and we're stressed out, and the world's just like, we feel like we got the weight of the world on our shoulders, but still keep pushing forward. Right? And express that it's there, that it exists. I don't have to act like it doesn't exist. And I think we need more of that. And like you were saying, you mentioned earlier how, the court system, there needs to be some more structure and in the way the court system operates on this issue, because I used to have an old commander in the Air Force who used to say all the time, he used to say, man, once people are involved, all bets are off.
Yeah.
Like once you involve people, they come with their own set of problems, they come with their own set of issues. So at least let the system have some kind of structure to help combat that and help balance that out. All the crazy shit that comes into the courtroom with all the people's personal issues, right?
Yep. Yes. That's just looking at it from a work perspective, right? We work in software development, and one of the big things we push is automation of workflows, because people make mistakes. Computers, as long as they're programmed correctly, they don't. And that's if there's that standardization guiding the decisions that are made. And that's one of the other things that we've come across, right? Is when we're pushing for this legislation, this rebuttable presumption of 50-50 custody, right? People automatically think 50-50 mandate, and it's not.
Right.
That's not what we want, because there are people who should not have equal access or even any access to their kids,
right,
or other people's kids. But what we want to do is make the standard 50-50, right off the bat, the starting point,
right? The baseline.
And if there are reasons, if there is abuse, neglect, endangerment of any sort, then a judge can deviate from that. And, even some of our biggest opponents have been, family court judges and lawyers, because they want that unlimited discretion, that complete overreach into our lives. They don't want to be held to something when trying to convince people that we're not holding you. We're making the standard, the starting point, 50-50. And if there is reason that a kid shouldn't be with both parents equally, then change it. But there's got to be a reason, and you've got to state why with facts.
Do you think it's just maybe just too much work to change it? That people are one of the reasons people are fighting against it, or is it really that much work?
Do you want to know my honest opinion?
Absolutely.
I think it's money.
Yeah.
I think it's money. We actually, my friend Jeb, you could talk to him. He actually did a breakdown the other day of attorneys in West Virginia and attorneys that practice family law and the amount of cases that are heard each year. It came out to like $60,000 per attorney that they would lose if 50-50 was passed.
Wow.
because from the very start, there's no fight.
Yeah.
It all comes back to money, and it's crazy because that Senate Judiciary Chairman who has the oversight of the bills and allows them to be read at his leisure, right? he's a I don't know if he's former or practicing family law attorney, but he owns a practice, and he's got at least 3 attorneys who practice family law.
Yeah.
And that same judge that testified against the bill last year in committee, she hears cases in his district. So like it's nuts the way that they're all connected. And I honestly think it comes back to money, man. And the people who make those decisions are the ones who are creating this hurdle for us to get over.
Yeah. And if it's money, right, and money is driving, part of the driving force why things aren't changing, and the people who are benefiting from this are, they have the money, they have the power to make these decisions. How do you combat it? Like, is it just like continuously increasing numbers, like grind? Like, how do you
strengthen numbers, man? Like we are going a different route this year. We've always had a House bill that's sponsored by one delegate, and last year I think there were 13 or 14 co-sponsors.
Mm-hmm.
But the House of Delegates is no problem for us. West Virginia in itself is a supermajority. The House and the Senate are both held by Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
First, it's crazy to see how partisan this bill is.
Mm-hmm.
There's overwhelming support on the Republican side and overwhelming opposition on the Democratic side.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter men or women. It is party lines.
Mm-hmm.
This battle. Except for those couple lawyers who are involved in this.
Yeah.
But
why do you think it's such a partisan issue?
It's politics, man. So it's the way one of the other, before I get back into the money thing, one of the other outside of the family court lawyers and judges who were fighting us on this was the domestic violence group. The Domestic Violence Coalition. And, men have this stigma that, we're abusers, right? When realistically, the majority of abuse, it doesn't have to be physical, it can be mental or verbal. It's often, women. And I'm not trying to create that divide either. I don't want to do that. It's just the way the numbers have, shown. And when it is a male abusing a child, most often it is like a partner of the mother. It's not the dad, it's not the biological father the majority of the time. It is the mother's partner who has created that imbalance there. But that's one of the other groups that was fighting us on it. And we heard a lot of pushback from them and other opposers on that topic. And even before it got to that committee, like we went in and we worked with that sponsoring delegate and said, here's what we're hearing. Here are the problems. How can we fix it? And we made amendments to the bill before it was even read. And then the Domestic Violence Coalition came and spoke against the bill in session. And they didn't even realize that the bill had been amended. Like they were talking about stuff that was in the original bill 2 months prior and without a clue. But outside of that, where was I going with it? Oh, the House bill versus, the House versus the Senate and how it's become partisan. I don't know why it's become so partisan outside of, the majority of the feminist groups and the majority of the domestic violence groups, are closer with that Democratic side. It's the Democrats are typically more progressive and leaning towards women's rights. And, that's just kind of the way the cookie has crumbled. But as far as our tactics have gone, it's always been a House bill. It's always been sponsored by a single delegate with several co-sponsors. But this year we're running a concurrent Senate bill. We've got one senator who has made this his baby this year, and he is not stopping until, he succeeds in some capacity. So we should be seeing the same bill, identical bills going through both chambers of the legislature this year with, the ability to pass it from one to the other. There's nothing different. it's the same bill people are seeing. So if there's a problem, then it's a problem in both houses and it gets changed.
Yeah.
But that Senate Judiciary Committee is where the biggest hurdle has been. And, if we can get it out of there with strength in numbers, no matter what he says, that chairman says, if they can get it out of that, with or without his approval, then that's what's going to be key, I think.
Nice.
So,
nice,
not only are laws evolving, but the tactics that we're using to try to affect change too.
Awesome, man. I think we need to get Kanye West involved.
I saw that too.
Like, we need to we need somebody with a big voice, man, a big platform.
Right.
Force people to listen. Like he's having some shared parenting struggles right now too. I saw that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, he'd be somebody perfect getting into this fight.
Right.
I say to be mindful of your time here, I'll ask you one last question, what would you say to fathers, man, like that are ready to give up, like because I'm in like single dad groups on Facebook, man. I see like quite frequently, man, where a guy will post something, he's be like, man, I give up. I'm ready to quit. Like, they're just, it really is tearing dads up, not seeing their kids, having a fight to see their kids, when they're just trying to be dads. Like, what would you say to those dads that are posting stuff like that online or feeling that way, that like, man, I quit, man, I'm done, I give up?
So there's, to put it in a personal perspective, there's a guy that we've, become close within our group, has, I think, 2 or 3 kids of his own. His current wife has 3 or 4 kids of her own. And then they were fostering a child too. Like the courts have literally deemed them good parents, good enough to take in a child that wasn't theirs and care for it. Right. And, through his own custody battles, he's in that situation. Like he's ready to give up because the guardian ad litem, there's, parental alienation is a thing. Like whether you want to believe it or not, it's a thing. And there are people who will brainwash their kids to hate the other parent. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But that's what happened to him. It's mom they don't get along. She took the kids, while he was deployed, and he had to come back to West Virginia and fight that battle. And, it's been several years, and, the kids, the oldest one, at least, he doesn't want to go to dad's. And the guardian ad litem in his case said, well, he doesn't want to go. We shouldn't force him to go, even if it is what's in his best interest, right? So like he's ready to quit because his kids are like quitting on him in a sense. It's unbeknownst to them, it's not their fault, but that situation occurs. And the biggest thing that I can say is, there obviously times get tough and you got to step back and take a break, but at the end of it, whether you get your kids or not when they're young, one day they're gonna know.
Yeah.
And if you can show them that you didn't give up, you tried your damnedest. You didn't succeed then. Someday it's gonna be worth it, and they're gonna know what happened and why. And they're gonna ask questions. And if you want to be the one who says, I just gave up, I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't worth it. I spent all my money.
Yeah.
How much money your kid's worth?
Yeah.
Whether you got money or not. Like there are groups out there like the pro se dad groups. I've had to go and represent myself pro se for a contempt case, and I won. It's not easy, and it's messy, and you don't do things right, but there are ways to work around it if you can't afford it, or but overall, in some capacity, don't give up. And if you see people who are ready to give up, fight even harder because they need it.
Yeah. That's great, man. Like, I think dads need to hear that, man. Like, there's a lot of people that need to hear that because I think there's a lot of people that are just ready to give up. And like you said, if you can see the long game, like, it sucks that you have to even play the long game as a dad to see your kid, but that's the world we live in, right? And and if your kid, like if you're, your kid wants to find answers and you say I gave up, they may feel like, well, maybe the relationship, it wasn't worth having a relationship anyway. But if they see that you've been fighting this whole time, they'll know and you'll be so grateful that you have that relationship with them whenever you can.
Yeah.
And once they're old enough to determine the truth for themselves. So
yeah. And if people want to look into it a little bit, search for Mark Ludwig with the Father's Rights movement. Like he went like 200 and some days without seeing his kid, maybe more. But he kept a journal every day. Like the other big thing, and I don't want to jump back into it, but just one more thing, on that topic, like don't give up. But if you're thinking about it, know first and foremost that you are not the only person in this situation. There are other people out there who, if you need support, whether they've been there or not, like there are people who are in your same situation, whether they're past it or they're still fighting it or, there is support if you need support.
Man, those are good words, man. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate what you're doing, the fight that you're fighting, what you're doing for fathers in West Virginia, which is going to help fathers all over the place. You're a great example and a good father, man. I appreciate you being here and taking the time to just chat with me.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me again. I know I rambled on a bunch in there, but there's like it is a subject that it is a hill I will die on any day of the week.
Yeah, man. Oh, man. It was all good information, man. I think a lot of fathers are going to benefit, and even fathers that don't. I'm sure there's fathers in West Virginia that don't know about the group, that can get access to the group. So if you're listening, or if you know somebody, you don't even got to be in West Virginia. Get on, West Virginia for Shared Parenting Fund, a Facebook group. See what they're talking about. See if you can get linked up with people, build relationships. The more, the merrier that gets in this fight. And if you're co-parenting, you listen to this, good, join the Co-Parenting Fathers Facebook group, and we're all fighting this fight together. We're all on the same team.
Yep. And if you're not in West Virginia and if you're fighting it somewhere else, we're in the same battle with you. If you need advice or, you want to bounce ideas, we're here. We've got people in other states and other resources that'll be more than willing to help too. So.
All right. Awesome, brother. Well, you just finished listening to another episode of The Molds That Make Fatherhood with Jared Mazezka. He gave some great information about shared parenting and a fight that we're doing in West Virginia. And thank you all for listening. See you on the next episode.